What's going on, bottom line viewers? It's Mitch here, back with another fantasy football stardom and sit 'em for week number 5 of the fantasy season. And in these videos, I give you the difficult starts and sits. I don't give you the easy starts. If you want me to tell you to start Todd Gurley, you probably should just go somewhere else. That's what I say every single week. So if you're into getting the tough decisions down and helping you actually win in fantasy football, make sure you subscribe to the Bottom Line View, hit the like button, and leave your comments below. Any questions you have regarding any players, starts, sits, one player over the other, certain matchup questions, whatever it may be, or even guys to pick up in the future. Let me know in the comment section below, and I'll do my best to help you out with it. I'm not going to be 100% accurate, but I can give you my best guess and my best analysis on what's going to happen to help you start the right player. And I feel like this season so far, I've been pretty accurate. So let's get into the starts and the sits, starting off with the quarterback position. And the quarterback position this week, I actually have 6 starts this week. Usually I only do 5 for every position, but I just felt like throwing an extra one in there because I think you guys deserve it. So let's start off with Ben Roethlisberger versus the Atlanta Falcons. Big Ben, he had a bad week last week against the Baltimore Ravens. But the first thing to note, the Baltimore Ravens defense is significantly better than the Atlanta Falcons defense. The Atlanta Falcons defense could be right now, with the losses of Keanu Neal, Deion Jones, Ricardo Allen, they potentially could be the worst defense in the NFL right now at this moment. They literally cannot stop anybody right now. They are playing 2 simple defenses, their same old cover 3, and they're switching in between that and another defense, and pretty much they're just getting torn up. It's a very predictable style of defense. It's a defense that doesn't have a lot of talent to go with the predictability, and it's just getting shredded by pretty much every team they play, including last week. So I think that this week, Ben Roethlisberger at home in a huge must-win, desperate game is going to have a big performance. Yes, he played a great Ravens defense and didn't come up with any significant fantasy output. But this week, he definitely should against Atlanta, a defense that's giving up a ton of fantasy points. Derek Carr versus the LA Chargers. Derek Carr has actually had a decent season so far this year in terms of statistics. And the biggest reason is because they've been in shootouts pretty much every single game. The Raiders' defense is horrendous. I would expect Phillip Rivers on the opposite side to have a great game as he's had this season. The Chargers' offense is very good, and I think this is going to force the Raiders to throw the ball a lot and keep pace with this opposing offense. That being said, Derek Carr will have to throw a lot, and I think just looking at it, I think both offenses will be able to move the ball quite efficiently. The Raiders' offense has played pretty well in every game. Derek Carr has been around 300 yards in every game. Now he's playing a Chargers defense who, again, like the Falcons, one of the worst in the NFL right now. They can't get the same pressure. Their secondary isn't as good as it was last year, and they're just not playing well. And it feels like Derek Carr is starting to get it going under John Gruden. Amari Cooper had a week last week. Jordy Nelson is getting a little bit more comfortable in the offense, and Jared Cook is having an awesome year. Plus, they're staying balanced with a great rushing attack from Marshawn Lynch. I think Derek Carr is the thing about Derek Carr is he needs to throw touchdowns in the game. When Derek Carr throws touchdowns, he's always a great start because he throws for a lot of yards. And we've seen he's been sort of protecting the ball a little bit better the last couple of weeks, so that's a positive. I think Derek Carr is going to put on a show against the Chargers in a shootout against Phillip Rivers. Alex Smith versus the New Orleans Saints. Now, this is a similar thing to Drew Brees and, Phillip Rivers and Derek Carr. I feel like Drew Brees is going to have a good game at home on Monday night against the Washington Redskins defense. And the Washington Redskins defense is pretty good, but, Drew Brees is Drew Brees, and that Saints offense is the Saints offense. So they're not going to be stopped very easily. But with the other side, Alex Smith, the Redskins offense versus the Saints defense, we have to figure, yes, the Saints defense did look better last week against the Giants, but you could argue that Eli Manning right now is the worst quarterback in the NFL, and that the Giants offense is very stagnant. This is an offense for the Giants that hasn't scored over 30 points in like 2 years. So the Saints defense, I felt like, didn't get a lot of pressure on Eli overall, and really wasn't all that great. It was more of the Giants messing their own offense up than the actual defense itself. This week, I really like what Jay Gruden is going to bring to the table in terms of scheme. He's had a couple of weeks. He's had a bye to build up to this point. Also, you have to remember the Redskins put on a show against the Saints last year. They scored over 30 points. They were actually leading the game by 15 until Drew Brees made a miraculous comeback and lost the game 34-31. Alex Smith this year instead of Kirk Cousins. But I think Alex Smith, he should really be able to hit Thompson underneath, Jordan Reed over the middle, Crowder as well. So I just feel like this is the perfect defense for Alex Smith to go against. It's not a lot of pressure, a really good offensive line in the Redskins, and you have all these underneath threats against a Saints defense that's really struggling in open space to cover and to tackle. So I like Alex Smith this week a lot against the Saints on Monday night. Blake Bortles versus the Chiefs. The Chiefs defense, if the Atlanta Falcons defense isn't the worst, the Pittsburgh Steelers defense isn't the worst, it's the Kansas City Chiefs. And actually, statistically, that is the case. Kansas City's defense is pretty awful. They cannot stop the run. They cannot stop the pass. And yes, I know, I do not like Blake Bortles. But in terms of fantasy, he does have some weeks where he goes off. This week, it is in Kansas City. It's a tough matchup. It's a big game. But I think that the Jaguars' offense and their game plan is going to be to keep the ball away from the opposing side in Patrick Mahomes. I think a lot of that is going to come with Blake Bortles and the short passing game and just keeping pace down the field. I don't think we're going to see any huge plays from the Jags offense, but we should see, short, methodical drives. And also Blake Bortles can get it done with his legs as well, stressing the Chiefs defense out. I could see Bortles having one of his best games of this season against the Chiefs defense that's struggling to cover. And these Jaguars receivers are very underrated. Plus, you have to figure when Leonard Fournette doesn't play for the Jags, Blake Bortles for some reason plays better and has better fantasy days. So that's good too. He's playing a Chiefs offense that's going to score even against this Jaguars defense, as he's going to be counted on to put up some fantasy points. Kirk Cousins versus the Eagles. Now, the Eagles defense on paper looks like an intimidating unit. People are still talking about them as a great defense, but that just hasn't been the case. Last week, they got absolutely destroyed through the air by Marcus Mariota, of all people, giving up big plays to Corey Davis, of all people. And now they're playing Kirk Cousins and the Vikings and Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen. Yeah, give me Kirk Cousins. I don't care that it's in Philadelphia. I don't care that the Vikings got blown out in the NFC Championship game. Kirk Cousins has traditionally had good fantasy games against the Eagles in the past. I think these receivers will absolutely torch this secondary. And the Eagles have been consistently, week in, week out, been giving up big plays because of Jim Schwartz's bonehead defensive scheme. So I can see Cousins having a very good game, and I actually could see this game being a shootout. So Kirk Cousins should put up a lot of yards once again and probably a couple touchdowns as well. So don't sleep on Kirk Cousins on this one. I know it says Eagles in the matchup, but the Eagles aren't the Eagles we think they are. Then we go Matt Stafford versus the Packers. This is my throw-in pick. Stafford has sort of been slept on the last couple of weeks in fantasy. I know he hasn't put up gaudy numbers or like anything fantastic, but he's been very consistent. And he plays a Green Bay defense that I feel like people are going to be, oh, they shut out the Bills. Well, it's the Bills. And I think that this game is going to come down to the two quarterbacks making plays. I could see Stafford having a very nice game here. The Packers are a little bit banged up in the front seven. I don't think the pressure will be overwhelming. I think Matt Stafford will have time. Golden Tate is on his game. Kenny Golladay is breaking out. And I feel like they have good matchups on the outside to take advantage of against the Packers' young secondary. So I'm going to start Matt Stafford as well this week. My quarterback sits Eli Manning versus the Panthers. As I stated earlier, I believe right now Eli Manning is probably the worst starting quarterback in the NFL. He's probably worse than some backups, to be quite honest with you. And the Panthers defense has had a bye week to prepare for the Giants offense and prepare for this run game in Saquon Barkley and prepare for Odell Beckham. You have to mention that the Panthers are probably a top 5-ish defense right now in the league. And I know that's not saying a lot given the certain circumstances of the defenses across the NFL right now, but that's still decent, right? And they're at home. And I just don't see Saquon being able to break out a lot of long runs, which will force Eli into some uncomfortable situations. And as Odell said today, they don't throw the ball over 20 yards, which is going to allow the Panthers' zone defense to really collapse on the short and intermediate passing game. I just can't see the Giants having a ton of success on offense in this game. Even if Odell breaks a 70-yard slant, I just can't see Eli having a great fantasy day. So definitely sit him or don't pick him up or whatever the case may be. Baker Mayfield versus the Ravens. Mayfield has had some good games so far throughout his young NFL career, but against the Ravens, I just stated earlier, the Ravens defense is elite. They're getting back Jimmy Smith. Jimmy Smith is one of the most elite corners in the NFL, and the Ravens as an overall unit are very difficult to break down. They have a very good run defense, which I think is going to eat up the Browns' rushing attack, which Mayfield has had a lot of success of working off of. Nick Chubb had a great game last week against the Raiders. Carlos Hyde has been very consistent, and Mayfield's been able to work off of that. With that not being as successful, I can't see him being overly successful with basically just Jarvis Landry to go to as a target in the passing game. I mean, these Browns receivers are pretty weak. Callaway's been very inconsistent. Njoku's pretty much non-existent. So the Ravens secondary clamping down on Jarvis Landry, I think they are probably going to lock down Baker Mayfield, and this could be the first sign of struggle for the rookie quarterback. Deshaun Watson versus the Dallas Cowboys. This might be a shocker to a lot of people. They play at home. It's in prime time. And Watson has looked better. And maybe I'm wrong here, but I just feel like there's a lot of great matchups across the fantasy world this week. And Watson isn't one of the more compelling ones. I think that the Cowboys defensive line, getting back Irving in the mix, their secondary's pretty damn solid. And they have good matchups. Like Byron Jones is one of the best corners right now in the NFL. And he is the prototypical type of corner you want to face against DeAndre Hopkins. Tall, long, physical. Awuzie's played very well. Will Fuller is banged up, and the offensive line is no good. And you're facing this ferocious defensive line for the Cowboys, getting back Irving, having some momentum and having some confidence now. So I feel like the Cowboys defense is going to be all over Watson. I could see this game being very low scoring, not a lot of risks from either offense. So I think that the Cowboys are just a tough matchup for Watson in this Houston offensive line. So I'm going to stay away from Deshaun this week if I have a better matchup on my team. Case Keenum versus the Jets. Keenum has just not been great in terms of fantasy purposes the last couple weeks. Even against the Chiefs, not overly exciting. So against the Jets defense that overall isn't that bad, especially in the secondary. They should probably force a couple mistakes from Keenum. And again, like the Cowboys-Texans game, I could see this game being very low scoring, probably even more so. Broncos, Jets both have pretty good defenses here, and I think this is going to be one of the games where the Broncos sort of struggle to move the ball. After having a fairly successful offensive week against the Chiefs last week, Marcus Mariota versus the Bills. Okay, let's slow the hype train down a little bit on Marcus Mariota. In his first few games, he basically couldn't pass for over 103 yards. So if we think he's going to have another great game this week, the Bills defense is well coached. It is at home. And it's not that bad. Like, overall, it's not that bad. It held the Packers to only 22 points last week. And the Titans' offense isn't very good. I think the Titans will be very conservative in this one. They know their defense can shut down the Bills' offense. They'll probably run the ball a lot. I could see the Titans winning a close game in a defensive fashion in this game. Don't expect Marcus Mariota to put up huge fantasy numbers this week. So I wouldn't pick him up or even consider starting him this week. My running back starts. Breida versus the Cardinals. The Cardinals have the worst rushing defense in the NFL, and Breida has looked very explosive, good with the ball in his hands and making guys miss. And Kyle Shanahan against the worst run defense in the NFL. That's pretty much free fantasy points as long as Breida is healthy and ready to go. Aaron Jones versus the Lions. This is one of the sleeper starts. The Lions defense is, I think, second. It's the worst or second worst. The Cardinals and Lions, I think, are the two worst run defenses in the NFL. And Aaron Jones looked like the most explosive Packers back last week. He scored a touchdown. He's just overall the most talented guy they have. And I think for the Packers to win this game, they're going to have to establish a little bit of a run attack to at least keep Matt Patricia's defense off balance. So I feel like Jones could score a touchdown in this game and have maybe one or two big breaking runs that could give you a good fantasy day if you're desperate at the position. Marshawn Lynch versus the Chargers. Lynch has been an absolute stud and consistent force for you on your fantasy teams if you own him. He's pretty much a no-doubt start, but I'm just throwing this out there because a lot of people are still doubting Beast Mode, but Beast Mode is back, and Beast Mode is a beast. I just, plain and simple. The Chargers defense, run defense over the past 3-4 years has been a huge concern, and it remains that way in this game. I think the Chargers will be able to run the ball on the Raiders, and I think the Raiders should be able to run the ball on the Chargers. Like I said, this should be a shootout with a lot of points scored, and you want a guy that's going to score a touchdown in this game, likely Marshawn Lynch. Kerryon Johnson versus the Green Bay Packers. Kerryon Johnson is a guy that every time he touches the ball, he looks like the best player on the field, pretty much. Against the Cowboys, very successful on a per touch basis. He's getting involved in the passing game and the running game, and he's starting to put up very good fantasy weeks. He just needs to get a little bit more opportunity to completely break through that shell. LeGarrette Blount is banged up. They're not sure if he's going to play. If he doesn't play, Kerryon Johnson could be a top 10 running back this week. Be very aware if LeGarrette Blount doesn't play. The Packers' run defense isn't bad, but it isn't great. And Kerryon Johnson should have a good day on the ground. He's by far the best back they have, and he's involved in the passing game. So Kerryon Johnson should have a nice day against the Packers. TJ Yeldon versus the Chiefs. The Chiefs, like I said, probably the worst defense in the league. TJ Yeldon's looked pretty good overall in replacement for Leonard Fournette. He's scoring touchdowns, which is always nice. And the opportunity is there for him. So I feel like with TJ Yeldon in a game that should have some points scored, like I said, the Jags should have some success running the ball and moving the football. TJ Yeldon is a pretty good start for you. Running back sits, Carlos Hyde versus the Baltimore Ravens. Like I said, the Ravens defense, they just swallow running backs up whole. They do barely give up like over 3 yards a carry, and Carlos Hyde is just a guy that needs a lot of touches to get not a lot of fantasy points. So for me, Carlos Hyde, just from a per touch basis, is not going to get it done against the Ravens, and you're probably better off going somewhere else this week. Kareem Hunt versus the Jags. He had an amazing game last week and really showed that he's still, elite player at this position. But I just think against the Jags, man, it's going to be so difficult for them to establish a run game. They're going to have to keep after it, and if they're going to win this game, they probably need Kareem Hunt to have a good game, but I just don't see it overall happening. Against the Jags front, they're just so good, and I feel like they could dominate that Chiefs offensive line in this game, so I'm not a huge fan of Kareem Hunt. Maybe you don't sit him, but if you have a better option, like maybe possibly one of my starts, like a Matt Breida that's sitting on the bench and you want to put him over him, then definitely go that way. I just think, temper your expectations for Kareem Hunt this week. You're not expecting a great week. So if you could sit him and start someone else, then potentially go with that option. LaShawn McCoy versus the Titans. I brought up pretty much every week how good the Titans are against the run. That remains the same. I mean, the Titans are a very consistent year in, year out, great run defense. A lot of that has to do with their front three guys on their 3-4 defense, specifically Jarrell Casey, who's pretty much a run stuffer. And LaShawn McCoy has not had any burst, any success this year in the run game. I don't expect that to happen against the Titans. Isaiah Crowell versus the Broncos. Broncos are a top 10 run defense this year. Yes, they had a poor game against Kareem Hunt, but I expect that to change against the Jets. Jets run offense hasn't been as successful the last couple of weeks. I actually expect Bilal Powell to actually probably have a better game than Isaiah Crowell overall in this one. The Vikings running backs versus the Eagles. Yes, I ripped the Eagles defense apart a little bit earlier, but they are still good against the run. They're elite against the run. I believe they're 1 or 2 or 3 in the NFL. And the Vikings overall, even with Dalvin Cook in the lineup, have not been successful running the ball. A lot of that stems from the offensive line, who's now traveling on the road. Bad offensive lines don't perform well on the road. Wide receivers. Let's go with the starts. Ridley versus the Steelers. Ridley's been an absolute beast and almost becoming a weekly start for you. Just making sure you're putting him in your lineup this week. Don't hesitate. Steelers secondary is god-awful. It cannot cover me. And I think Ridley should have a big week, as well as Mohamed Sanu. Watch out for Mohamed Sanu. Should probably have a big week as well. I would just start any receiver you have on the Atlanta Falcons. That's probably just a good idea because the Steelers secondary is getting torched week in and week out, and Matt Ryan should do that to the secondary once again. Kenny Stills versus the Bengals. Bengals are giving up one of the most yards to the wide receiver position in general. And Kenny Stills had a down week last week, but the Dolphins' offense in general had a down week. I think he still led the team in yards last week at the position. And Kenny Stills against the Bengals, I just think we could see Miami hit a couple big plays against the Bengals. They should have a rejuvenated offensive game plan after a bad week, and they should be motivated to get back into the winning category. I don't know if they'll win this game against the Bengals, but both offenses have proven that they can score points this year, and I could see Kenny Stills being the beneficiary of that for the Dolphins. Keelan Cole versus the Chiefs. Like I said, I like the Jags offense this week. I like Yeldon. I like Bortles. And a receiver's going to have to come into play here. Keelan Cole is, in my opinion, the most talented of the bunch. And I think his route running and his savviness in that department is going to give him a lot of good matchups against some of these weaker Chiefs corners. And he should get one or two big plays in this game. Jordy Nelson versus the Chargers. He's been very consistent over the last couple of weeks. Seems like he's really getting after it. He's really capturing the offense and getting some chemistry with his quarterback, Derek Carr. And I could see against the Chargers a secondary that's really not performing up to what the expectation was. This game's going to be a shootout. I wouldn't be so shocked if he scored a touchdown. I wouldn't be shocked if he led the team in yards. Boyd versus the Dolphins. Boyd, without Tyler Eifert now, they really only have two legitimate receiving options. Now Joe Mixon is back and Giovanni Bernard at running back as well. They can mix in there. But Tyler Boyd's been a stud for them in the slot. I could see him having another good game against the Dolphins. A Dolphin secondary isn't that bad overall. But overall, just the way the Bengals offense is rolling, the way Andy Dalton is playing, and then they need to go to somebody other than A.J. Green with Tyler Eifert out. So I believe it's going to be Boyd even more so now, and you could see his targets increase because of the trust he has with his quarterback. Wide receiver sits Demaryius Thomas versus the Jets. Should probably see Tremaine Johnson in this matchup, and the Jets secondary is pretty good. Demaryius Thomas also, I feel, is been outplayed by the youngster Courtland Sutton for the most part. He's dropping passes. He's not getting consistently open and getting separation. Even when he does, he slacks on the route. He just looks like he's lost a step. And the Jets defense, I think, is going to keep this one a tight game. So I don't really love Demaryius Thomas in this game. I don't expect him to get in the end zone or create any big plays. Sterling Shepard versus the Panthers. Like I said, Panthers actually have cover corners this year. Usually the Panthers, they're just a great front seven with zone behind it. They have the capability with their corners this year to mix and match a little bit more. Sterling Shepard, yes, had a couple big games this year, but I just don't see it happening against the Panthers defense, and Eli will struggle in this game. Mike Williams versus the Raiders. The Raiders have actually only given up one touchdown to receivers this year, and Mike Williams has been relying on touchdowns so far this year. So I don't see that happening in this game. You know, maybe, but, like, I think there's better options to go with. Like, if I was deciding between Mike Williams and Keelan Cole, I'd go with Keelan Cole, just for an example there. Sammy Watkins versus the Jaguars. Bouye, Ramsey. Doesn't matter what side of the field he lines up on. He's not a primary option in this offense. He's the fourth option. And against a matchup of that degree, it's just not a good one. Like, Sammy Watkins is a guy you start against bad defenses, not against the best in the NFL. Enunwa versus the Broncos. He's going to see Chris Harris, who's still one of the best corners, specifically sock corners in the game. Enunwa is a guy that's consistently going to put up at least five catches for you a week. But in this game, I just wouldn't expect a total explosion against a Broncos secondary that's pretty good. They've been good in coverage, not giving up a lot of big plays, and Chris Harris, like I said, is a stud. The tight end starts. Mcdonald versus the Falcons. They can't cover anybody. They have no safeties. They have no cover linebackers. Mcdonald should have another good game in this one, and he's really proven himself to be a gem for the Steelers. Ricky Seals-Jones was the 49ers. The 49ers have given up a touchdown to a tight end every single week of the season. If you're in need of a pickup, pick up Ricky Seals-Jones. Austin Hooper versus the Steelers. The Steelers haven't been able to cover tight ends since 2010, and that still remains. Ricky Seals-Jones against the 49ers. Austin Hooper, same thing. I mean, he's just in a great matchup, and Atlanta should score a lot of points, and you're just hoping he scores a touchdown in this game. Antonio Gaines versus the Raiders. I'm just going to ride it, see what happens. And usually what I do is, I mean, there's not a lot of tight ends in this fantasy right now. I mean, it's just a fact. There's like 5 that you can really count on. And a lot of people are having to deal with shitty tight ends or not getting a lot of points or just having to roll with the waiver wire. So Antonio Gates is a guy that's expected to be in a shootout with a great passing offense, with great chemistry with his quarterback against a team with bad linebackers. I feel like it's worth a shot with Antonio Gates. Maybe he gets in the end zone. Maybe he has 40-ish yards. And, so I just think with the tight end position, just go with the guy that you think is going to be in a shootout. Maybe he'll score. And then the last one, it's not a start or a sit. It's just watch out for Hayden Hurst this week. Because if you're one of those guys that has a bad player at the tight end position or a skeptical player at that position, pick up Hayden Hurst. Watch out for him this week. If he has a big game for the Ravens, potentially he could be a startable asset every week because he was a first-round pick. He's very talented in the passing game, and Joe Flacco loves his tight ends. So watch out for Hayden Hurst. Don't start him. Don't sit him. Don't anything. Just watch him and wait. Okay. All right. I hope you guys enjoyed this start 'em and sit 'em for week number 5 of the 2018 NFL season. If you did, hit the like button and subscribe for more fantasy start 'em and sit 'em here on the Bottom Line View. It's Mitch. Hope you have a good NFL weekend. Peace out.